Lorenzo as well.
Oh yeah, see, he just started that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many podcasts now. I'm like, since lockdown, I'm just like, oh fuck this. Should I even keep going with this? Like,
I'll definitely keep going, bro.
yeah.
100%. Yeah,
I'm
definitely.
interested to see who keeps doing them.
After, yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's the real test.
Yeah, exactly. All right,
Anyone?
we're on. We're rolling. We're actually live. Finally. Take a little minute before people start turning up, but that's cool. At least it's actually working. So what was the one with Lorenzo like? What kind of stuff do you guys talk about?
That was dope. It was kind of just went back into like, yeah, how I started, spoke about like 3 or 4 different kind of projects I've done.
Mm-hmm.
Then sort of the DP kind of director relationship and how that kind of functions from my side and sort of what the collaboration process is. Yeah, it was dope, really dope.
Okay, so they kind of beat me to it. So now I'm thinking I got to try and switch this up and somehow find a way to make this different.
there's always new stories to tell. No one ever gets anything fully concentrated unless you're like the PR person that just has the same beat sheets that you kind of filter out places. So don't worry, we've got plenty to discuss.
Okay, cool. Um, right, sorry, I'm just trying to make sure that this is live and it's all set up before I start doing this properly because I'm hoping, because I've done so many of these now, I'm hoping that this one I can just not edit because it's live.
Mm.
The idea is it will just flow and I won't have to go back and edit because the editing, man, it takes me fucking ages.
Oh, I can imagine. I used to do at some point I was an audio engineer, so
Okay.
working with like waveforms and cutting and chopping and sort of finding all the peaks, troughs, distortion points, gaps,
Mm,
things you've got to mask. It's like a whole, and then sometimes depending on the audio where you're getting it from, it's like audio restoration and a whole bunch of different things. So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's tricky. The one thing I've learned, I say I've learned, but I still find myself having to go through is like when the guest is saying something and I kind of like nod in agreement or like I want to kind of interact, but even just saying like nodding and going or yeah, like even that is work for me to do because I cut it out because like I don't want to just see like random nods like yeah, cool, like in between the guest sentence. So
yeah,
I'm learned to kind of just like do the nod and make sure that I'm still coming across that I'm engaged, but actually not make any audio.
it's hard because yeah, you have to almost play poker face, even though like as you're saying, there's things you agree on, and you're like, it kind of hits a note or a chord, but you can't actively show that audio
Yeah,
wise. I get it. I get it.
exactly. So I'm slowly trying to figure it all out. Um, okay, well we'll just kind of start from now then. I'm just gonna do one last check. All right, got a couple of people in here. All right, man. Thank you very much for coming on. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me. But glad to be here. Happy to be here.
Yeah. How have you been keeping in lockdown?
Yeah, cool. I think this week it's probably started to drag for me. I think the initial first few weeks and time period was I was probably, you try and find the positives from the negatives essentially. So I think the positives I found was being able to sort of spend more time with Lil Man. He's 2 years old.
Mhm.
So having that sort of like unfiltered time and just being able to kind of like do a whole bunch of stuff's been cool. I think this week's been like, okay, I like, you just want to get back to like working, doing stuff. So this week's been a drag. No complaints. But yeah, how about yourself?
Oh, good, man. Like honestly, it's getting a little bit tedious now.
Mm,
Not so much like with the not working because I mean, I'll be the first to admit I have done very long stints of not having very much and next to no work. Like last year had a really bleak period. So I'm used to like being at home and having to find other ways to be productive and like keep it moving and just do something. But it's all the other shit that's like put on us that is starting to get to me now, like not being able to go see my friends, not being
yeah,
able, like I live right by Victoria Park and I can't even let my dog off the lead. Like they've changed all the rules. So I have to keep my dog on the lead, which just makes the walk like a lot less enjoyable for me, my
yeah.
girlfriend, for the dog. You can't like you can't do any static exercises in the park.
No,
So
it's
that is just like that, all that shit is getting to me now. But the like being stuck at home and trying to be forced to stay busy, I'm kind of getting by that. And like we were chatting about before, just dosing that with Call of Duty is helping me get through it.
I said to you, man, I've retired from directing life. I'm just a Call of Duty player now. That's my
Yeah.
career. You know, if an agency wants to sign me for representation for Call of Duty, I'm here. I'm
Was
around.
doing the Joker, right?
Yeah, just add me.
Yeah.
I'm around.
That taking
ha-
heads off.
I'm happy to go to any war zone that we need to. Let's do this.
Nice. Oh man, I'm so grateful for Call of Duty in this time, for real.
Yeah, it's been I think yeah, just the notion of, I think what's great about that is just that, like, A, it's a free game.
Mm,
B, especially if you've got like headsets and, you know, sort of your audio out loud, you can just connect with your mates and have a cool time. So it's been enjoyable playing with my friends, mainly because, you know, we're all in the same boat and we just get a chance to kind of like break away and not have to think so much about, you know, the current events, which is cool. So
yeah, because it is like a way of it's a way of hanging out, really, isn't it? It's kind
yeah,
of
big
like
time.
a Zoom chat, but just there's a bit more. There's a bit more going on.
Yeah, a lot more things firing off at different cylinders that you got to
Yeah,
respond to. Yeah.
stressful, stressful. All right. Well, let's start with yeah, just talk about what it is you do now, and then go back and sort of give us the journey of how you got to where you are right now. And you can be as in depth with it as you want, or you can just talk about key parts.
Mm, sure. Yeah,
Yeah, man.
sure. Yeah, so I'm a film director. I came about sort of the pathway in a long form way. It was really, well, a roundabout way, should I say. Um, I wanted to direct from when I was young. Sort of film was like probably my first love. That and music were the two things I loved, like growing up as a kid. So I remember with my dad. My dad's like a massive film encyclopedia. So I grew up, you know, probably shouldn't have grown up this way, but I was watching Scorsese films when I was like early teens. You know, Casino, Goodfellas, Mean Streets, um, Kings of Comedy, you name it. Probably sort of his whole filmography from my dad. Um, then all the kids' films I sort of grew up with, and all the classics and so forth. And I was always just mesmerized by storytelling, whether that was Disney films or, you know, live action films or kids films. Just that notion of kind of emotion on screen, and just I remember all the emotions that I used to feel or come across, or empathy points I had when I was young. Film always felt like the most relatable aspect of things to me. Um, Music also, just that ability to kind of either storytell in such a short form, um, just always, yeah, just kind of resonated and captivated me. I think from young. Um, so when I finished school, I studied media, so studying film and music at the same time. But I was around, because I'm from East London. I was around like the music scene here, and so I went off and done music for uni, even though I wanted to do film. And I think it's just because music felt so accessible to me, because we were doing music like it was accessible at the time. It was fun, it was interesting, and film always felt like America to me. And everything that was the UK at the time for me was like, you know, it was BBC dramas. It was, you know, ITV used to have a lot of movies that were shown, you know, made for TV sort of movies.
Hmm.
Um, I remember we had the Guy Ritchie's and stuff come out with like Lock, Stock and a bunch of stuff, but yeah, film just never felt obtainable. So I sort of, when I studied music, went into the music industry, was working for Universal Music as a sort of marketing, well, I was intern first, and I went up to like marketing coordinator. So I went up like 4 times in a row over the space of like 4 years, or 5 years. And while I was there, I was always filming. You know, we found ourselves like sort of in the 5D generation of being able to kind of create content. So I had a fashion platform that I was running with a few mates, and we used to create content with brands, for brands, around brands. Initially, it started off as episodic, um, and it just kind of like, I guess, kind of re-energized my love for film, and I just started to realize, okay, you know, I can this can happen. You can do things. So I finished up at Universal, went over to Sony Pictures. Was originally like a marketing manager there, but my aim was to kind of get into the production team that was sort of in and around, which I'd done within a few months. So I moved over to the production team, started working as like a producer pretty much, which is a different term for Sony Pictures. It's not a standard producer role that we would know. It was more about um, you were responsible for editing sort of promos and TVCs, creating them, writing scripts, um, getting voiceovers, and then we were also tasked with shooting content as well. So I learned a lot sort of from being on set and that holistic of sort of pre-production down to post-production, because you had to be at the very sort of heartbeat of each step. So that was a really good learning curve for me, and just kind of like I took so much knowledge from it. The content was terrible, but sort of you start to work out that what's bad and dial in your taste. I already had taste when I was there. It was just the content that they had for the networks. Um, the types of channels that we were working across weren't the most fancy, but what I was picking up was just more of precision in terms of, okay, cool, this is how I've always been attuned to kind of camera movement and a whole bunch of different stuff. But I think when you can sort of take yourself out from the theory and kind of be a lot more practical, I think theory and practicality sort of work hand in hand. They're both two sides of the same coin. So I learned a lot by that aspect in regards. So then I felt like I achieved everything I needed to achieve while being in that team. They wanted me to sort of become more senior, but yeah, the pathway wasn't sort of my way. So I sort of decided to go freelance. Spent my first year pretty much just doing a whole bunch of different types of jobs, like fashion stuff and content jobs and things that paid okay, well, paid pretty decent for what they were. But again, they were just learning curves. It was like, okay, cool, I can do this. This can be done. It was me trying to figure out sort of where I wanted to land and how I was going to do some stuff. And I spent that first year doing that, revisited sort of what moved me, and nothing that year moved me. Everything was just like a job, just
Mhm.
kind of, okay, shoot a lookbook here, shoot this content piece. But none of it for me had any heart or soul, which are the two things that I think creatively you need. You may not be able to get it every time you do stuff, but that's what I started looking at. And I remember just speaking to a few different people around me, and just one of the things we started talking about was creating your own kind of work.
Mhm.
And I started to get closer to that. I mean, by I done a few music videos and a few different bits that started to feel a bit closer to kind of where I wanted to be aesthetically. I'm still not there in regards to what's in my head is still not necessarily ever been achieved my side anyway on screen, yeah, or not screen, but
Yeah.
in some sort of film format. Um, not to like not to a full sort of dilution, I guess, or sort of concentration level yet. But I started doing things where I think people started to get sort of where my headspace was at, and those things enabled me to have more confidence to start creating sort of more of my own work. Um, and then so I feel like first year was, like I said, first year was like learning curve, doing content stuff. Okay, cool. Second year was doing more personal work, and then sort of within my third year of freelancing, which was last year pretty much, I was able to create like a few different pieces that um, I think went down with a few people that people had some nice comments about. Um, and yeah, it's taken me here. So within when I started creating my own work, that's when I sort of the end of that year, which was 2018, start of 2019, I got picked up by Partisan. So I was signed to them up until this year, Jan. Um, and then yeah, now I'm with Familiar.
And so that first year you went freelance, were you straight away just directing, or were you self shooting some stuff as well? Because I remember we spoke before. You used to have your own camera.
Yeah, I had my own camera. So when I was at Universal and I was doing this stuff, I was self shooting from that point. The plan wasn't to do that. It was more meant to kind of oversee how content was done when we had this fashion platform. But then I sort of got more involved in the creative, because I think I've always had. I think my head has always been in that sort of space and realm. So then at some point I started self shooting for our platform and learning the ropes, and sort of learn things pretty quick. Um, and then I think that's what caught sort of the bug that I had in regards to kind of creating content and just being able to kind of felt very hands on, just being able to have a vision, try and sort of capture it as best as you can, or sort of with intention. Um, so I had a self shooting background up until the second year of freelancing, because I think what happened after the first year was that I got some cool content and stuff looked cool, but my love has always been for DPs and cinematographers, and that always felt like the step of me getting to that stage to be able to work with sort of talented people in that realm. Um, on content that also served them and served me made sense,
Hmm.
and that's what I sort of wanted. I think the stuff I was doing for the first year wouldn't have really engaged any DP of any standard. Again, they just were learning curves for myself, and I'm always precious about what I work with people on. You know, um, I respect people's time as much as I can, and so that collaboration process, I want to be able to work with someone, and hopefully, whatever we do is going to be for the real for both of
Hmm.
us. Um, Sometimes you may have a couple jobs that means that, well, it might mean that you actually, uh, okay, let's say for example, a Converse job came in, the first one's not so glamorous, but if you do that as a pair, um, the scope there already to kind of do something where they're going to sort of have more trust in you and a bit more fancy, and just you're able to get a lot of more of yourself out. If those things arise, I'll sort of be very engaged to kind of make that sort of a thing. But if I don't feel it's worth a DP's time, especially at that time, I just sort of just self shoot.
Okay, that's interesting. And I get I mean, it says a lot, that you'd almost, if you're not fully back in that project, you'd rather shoot it yourself than bring someone on to do it. And would that be the case even if you thought that DP would still shoot it better than you would? You'd still be like, no, I don't, I don't want to waste that DP's time. I'd rather do it myself.
Uh, I think it depends on the client and what it is. Like I've had some jobs where I just know that the client's going to be a nightmare. They're going to be a nightmare on set, but I have the threshold to deal with it, handle it. I know
Hmm.
the project won't take too long, so it's like a week in, out. It's a 1 day shoot, but in terms of overall turnover, planning, and so forth. Um, so I think at the time I was trying to work out just if it would be someone worth someone's time.
Hmm.
Again, will it be used for the real, you know, is it building a relationship? Nah, and if 9 times out of 10, most of it's a no, I'm like, there's no point. So like with Olan, who's like, obviously one of my main collaborators, um, when I met Olan, I had my own studio in Hackney Wick. So actually when I was working at Sony, I had a studio for like 4 years in Hackney. And that's where we would just go off and just shoot monologues. We shoot a whole bunch of different like tests. We were like really fully creative, and that felt better than sort of having a client sort of breathe down your neck.
Mm.
It was more of a forum and place for us to kind of create and sort of like learn ourselves, push ourselves, try different techniques and things that we could then apply to real work and like real stuff in the real world. So that felt like a better collaboration versus kind of being on set. And for me, I think I also wanted to learn the dynamics of, okay, as a director, how do you deal with client? How do you deal with talent? Okay, next minute you've got a DP, and how do you then sort of deal with all of these? So I think what it afforded me to do was learn things in bits. So it's like,
Mhm.
okay, just this is client, this is crew and talent. As crews got bigger, okay, this is this now. Sorry, I just hit my laptop. It was like yeah, it was a good learning curve in that regards.
And how did you find that transition going from shooting like I guess essentially self shooting director to having a DP on? Was did you have any anxieties about um letting go? Because I guess to a point you're letting go of some control and trust in the DP with
Yeah,
something that you'd have probably been doing yourself before.
yeah, yeah. No problems in letting go. For me, I always felt like I don't know if you ever get this, but you kind of have you come out of a dream and like you can feel where you were in this dream and what had happened, but you can't unless you kind of write that down pretty quick or repeat it to yourself pretty quick. It's kind of vague.
Yeah.
You know, Sometimes that's how like shoots can or would be for me. Like I know where I'm going, I know what I'm feeling, but a DP will come in and articulate that way better than I will, and sort of be able to kind of take this blueprint that I have and provide architecture. So I've never sort of been worried about, and especially at that stage, I was never worried about handing over any kind of control. If anything, I embraced it. I was like, oh, I don't have to hold this camera again and carry this heavy gear with me again. Thank God.
Yeah.
Olan will tell you he'll flame you one day. He does this all the time, but he was, we went through a period where our collaborations changed to the point where like I wouldn't touch a single kit on set, and he'd be there and be like, "It's just me setting up lights and the camera. There's no other crew here. Like you could help out." And I was like, "Those days are done, man. I'm cool. I'm all right."
You
I'm
leveled
like,
up
yeah,
now.
I'm a director now. I don't want to touch nothing.
Yeah.
No, because I hurt my back at one point while carrying kit and just doing these self shooting jobs to the point where I had to have like an epidural.
Oh,
Um,
damn.
Took me out for a while, and that's because I was like doing way too much as like a single shooter. Um, and yeah, I was thankful just to not even touch that stuff again. Um, and yeah, it's also trust. I trust my DPs.
Yeah.
You know,
That's a lot to ask sometimes, sometimes directors don't give us that.
yeah. No, I think you have to. You know,
I guess it goes both ways.
it does. It does. I mean, like even with my, I edit pretty much most of my work. You know, any of the DPs I work with, they'll tell you they're the main person I'm talking to in the edit. I see a DP's role as vast. You guys are on so many different types of shoots, projects. You're arming yourself with so many different references, whether that's from imagery or film, just all these different kind of facets and pockets of places. Um, you're a knowledge pool. So for me, because the DPs I work with have similar taste, if not more taste in different places, or just vaster taste as well. So I'm also trusting in that. So when it comes to the edit, I'm just checking to see what they're feeling, what they're not feeling, and I'm having a conversation with them. It's two filmmakers having a chat about the project they've worked together. It's like two parents talking about their child. I don't try and be the single parent where it's like you're out the mix now. He's at my house now, or she's at my house. Like bye bye.
Yeah.
You have no say so here. It's very much like a dual dialogue that I keep, and I think that's why I have good relationships with the DPs that I have.
And is there ever any situations where is not possible for you to keep the DP involved that much in post? Sometimes, for example, I've like a grade will go ahead, and a grade will be booked in and done before like I don't even know about it. And I'm just like, oh man, like what the fuck? Even though I know the director kind of wanted me there and wanted me to be a part of it, but things just move so quickly.
Yes,
Um,
it can be tough. Like I've had it work against me before, maybe on not as many projects, but it's been like, okay, the DP is here and the grade needs to be there. So, those two things don't align. And then, they may be on set and then we're in the grades and not even seeing the stills, or they've seen the stills, but they've seen it from their phone. It looks cool on the phone. And then like it comes out and they're like, why is there loads of film grain? Like, what's this from? And just all the things you can't really kind of tune. So I do my best to make sure that they can be in. It's important to me. And if I have to like kick up a fuss about it, then I will, because it's important. Because I can't remember who said this to me or where I heard this, but it's wherever this information came from. It's like fantastic, but it might have been. I think it's Sean James Grant. I think Sean James Grant said this to me, but yeah, it was Sean. Sean said, whatever piece you're making, the first time it's made is like the script or the writing of it, right, or treatment. The next time it's made is on set, the production. The third time it's made, because it's always remade, right? It's like, okay,
yeah.
the third time it's remade is the edit. And then the fourth time is the grade, And I remember just being like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like the grade is just, this on top. And it's like, nah, you can have all three of those other steps perfect and the grade falls to hell, and that's not what you want. And I think Toby from Cheat, I saw a talk with him last week and he was saying that, your colorist is your film stock. I was like, that's completely correct.
Wow.
It's like, that's what it is. So it's really important that I need my DP there, because again, I think there's things that they're seeing that I won't see, or there's things they can articulate a lot better. And just like also their intention behind some shots, it's like, I've been in with Oda and I've been in with Courtney Bennett, and I've seen how, they want like power windows here. So this is like accentuated and this is kind of muted, there's like a real intention behind sort of how they were shooting already. And I think that process of like the DP speaking with the colorist as well, and sort of also having that real time conversation is important. Um, so yeah, I fight for it at every angle, and if not, the times it hasn't worked against me is the times it hasn't been on my reel.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So that's maybe a nice nice point to kind of segue into um your reel, but more specifically spec projects.
Mm.
Because you, I mean, from it looks like you've got quite a few, or you try and make a, like you focus on spec projects.
I do.
Um,
It was my mates who know me had. There's a classic story about me, which is like I spent so long not doing stuff, and that's just because I was so much in my own head and worried about creating that it just crippled me from actually doing stuff. You know, for me, it's like I, I can't say I'm a perfectionist because I don't feel it's that. I think it's just more of a case of I'm so paranoid about creating and just how things fit. Like I want to be that guy who's super cool, can just walk in the room, just feels like, you know, I've got incense burning for days and just can never worry about anything. That's the guy I've always wanted to be in my
mhm,
life. And the person I am is the one who's always like worried about, you know, every time I export a video out, I say, all right, is it okay? Is this, is this that? You know,
yeah.
I'm in the edit or I'm doing some stuff or I'm writing a piece and I'm like, have I said this? Has this been done? You know, just I'm constantly, and it's annoying because it's like it's a thing I can't switch off. So I had that in terms of creating, and then it got to a point where it's all right. You know, I've just got to create. If I'm not going to create, you know, no work will happen in that sense. I can't just rely on client projects because depending how your client, you know, you have to judge a client at each stage of the process. They can be the nicest people at the start and the worst people at the end, or they could be the worst people at the start and the greatest people at the end. And a lot of that bears down, especially if you're a new director, on like what type of ride you will have during creating like that kind of content at work. So for me, I think looking at someone like Salomon, for example, just seeing his dedication to creating really great, uh, powerful and awesome work of his own, you know, sort of really inspired sort of what you know, I felt you could do as a filmmaker and where you could go and how you could create. And for me, um, I don't see myself as like, I'm not trying to be like a prolific music video director. You know, it's not where my headspace is at. You know, I like him and I think it's a great world and I love the art of it and the craft of it. But you know, feature film and film is kind of where my head's at. And so for me to be an auteur, you have to be able to show people your voice and show people sort of where you're at. And like I said, I don't feel I'm there. I still like I know where my taste is and I know where my head is at. So it's trying to align that gap of, you know, that tier of where that is at and where I'm at. It's trying to get those two things closer together.
Mhm.
And so I feel like creating kind of that kind of work is a stepping stone in that sort of direction.
And do you feel like, I know for me that this the work that I put out and the work that I show, whether it's spec or paid work, is 9 times out of 10 the work that I will continue to get. And
Yeah,
do you feel that's the same for you as a director? Like the work you show, and which would be why you shoot specs and why you create specs, is the work that you show is kind of, you're almost proving like this is the work I want to create. This,
yeah,
so hire me to do this.
yeah. It's a weird one. Yes and no. So I think people got me a bit more. No, in terms of like that work came out while I was at Partisan, and like I don't think those two things married together. I think they had me on their roster, and I think it was I think where whatever their intentions were for me is probably not sort of how we got there in regards to kind of like stuff in of that vein. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it's a hard one to judge because the best way to answer it is pretty much when I was freelance, what I was creating is what I was getting back in. But when I was signed to an agency, that wasn't the same format. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? I assumed it would be pretty similar, but it wasn't the same format. And that comes down to just kind of the nature of what an agency is and how they function. You know what I mean? It's like they can see you for work. Um, it's like, okay, cool. It's like football, right? Okay. we're Man U, we've seen Alan Smith at Leeds, and he's a striker, but Fergie's decided to play him as a midfielder. Even though he's banging all these goals in at this time, and he was in the Champions League, he's done all this stuff. He sees him as a midfielder. I think that's kind of what happened as well, and I think that's what happens at agency sometimes. Like you can go off and you might be the director who's like, you've done these really beautiful tabletop stuff, and it's food stuff, for example, tabletop food stuff, and they're like they've seen two things on your reel, and they're like they can do beauty, and so now you're not even doing the food stuff, but they're getting to do beauty, and it's like may not be your intention, but that's where they see you kind of being placed. So yeah, so it's interesting in that regards and kind of how that all fits and moves. But yeah, I was hoping it would be evocative of where I wanted to go, but it wasn't as coherent as I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess maybe we can sort of talk about having an agent.
Mm-hmm.
So you were on Partisan, and then you say you left there, or you kind of parted Partisan in January.
Indeed. Yeah.
And so I guess because now you've probably spent, as a director, you've probably spent a decent amount of time on your own as a freelancer, and a fair bit of time being repped and having someone kind of trying to push you to find work for you.
Mm-hmm.
What are the kind of the pros and cons to both? Because there's got to be, like, I guess freelance, your hands are less tied, right? You can take pretty much whatever job that comes to you.
Yeah.
Whereas, especially if you're on like an exclusive deal, you can't.
No,
like,
you
I'm
can't.
in that position as a DP
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
Like, I
yeah.
can't do that anymore.
It's mad. It's crazy. Yeah.
But yeah, talk about that, because it'd be interesting to see how that is for a director, because it's, man, especially like music video directing. I know that what you guys are asked to do, like what's expected of people directing music videos, is ridiculous in terms of like what you're expected to create for the budgets is just sometimes just outrageous.
Yeah, it's an insane world. I think both definitely have their pros and cons. I think everything comes down to who you are as a person and where you want to go, and the energy of an agency. So, like with my time at Partisan, they were all great. Like my EP was fantastic. The whole team there was fantastic. Everyone was really supportive and really dope. And I've got nothing, I've got nothing sort of negative to say about them in that regards. My only question would be like, I don't know how much of a fit it was in regards to where they're functioning as a company, and just sort of how they sit in the ecosystem of this space. So I think as a director, you have to just ask yourself, being repped, how are you going to be positioned? Because the minute that you're repped and what you do get is you get exposure to all these great treatments and briefs and different things, and you've got people there going to bat for you, really marketing you, saying, this director is the person. They're great. They will do this for you. And so you've got someone selling you like left in, left right, left in, left out, like every week on all these great projects, and you get all these exposures to stuff. And I think as a new director as well, you're going to have so many different treatments that you're writing on. You get better at writing treatments really quick. You start to realize, okay, they responded to this and they didn't respond to that. So it's great in terms of sharpening your tool set and figuring things out. And then when you see the video that you didn't get, you can kind of also deduce and work out, what those favoring factors were. Was it, is it the treatment? Is it the director's name and momentum? Is it also the production company and sort of the history they have? All these different things kind of weigh in and weigh out, but you can only be responsible for yourself and sort of putting your best foot forward. And I grew a lot within my year with them, like fantastically, which was not fantastically, but like, I'm super thankful for my time there, because I learned and matured a lot under them. On the freelance side of things, it is interesting, yeah, because you have all the freedom in the world. You can create, you can work with whoever you want to work with. What then comes down to everything is you're a lot more responsible for yourself. You're a lot more responsible for building relationships with commissioners directly, building trust, because what comes with a production company and being repped is trust. Any production company that has a name or has IP behind them, and great IP, there's trust there, there's a portfolio there. You know that actually they're not going to go for a director who's so solo, and it can just be like the wild, wild west in terms of the shooting style and what's going on.
Mm.
And so that's interesting. I find that like a lot of the freelance directors are a lot more. You can find a lot more kind of creativity sometimes, and that's because they haven't necessarily got the same constraints as a production company. The minute there's like a 10K project, a production company, they need their markup. This thing needs its markup. That thing needs its markup. So by the time you look at the money that's on screen, it's not much. Where you take a 10K and it's just you solo with a small team of people, you might just all say, no one's getting a markup. We ain't getting paid. Let's put this on screen, and you've created like a beautiful piece. You can't do it all the time either, and so it's really hard. And and I think I've seen great examples of people doing well in both places. I think we know countless people doing well signed, but like I look at someone like Gabriel Moses who's unsigned, and his work's incredible, and the way he works is like fantastic, and just like he's so daring with the type of work that he does. He's able to explore as a filmmaker. So it has its pros and cons. You just need to make sure that like you being signed suits you, and the energy of that company suits you in terms of how you operate and how you function. And then if you're not signed, it's just making sure that like you have less middlemen involved, or middle people, should I say, involved, and build those relationships directly with the commissioners and stuff. Because if they know you and they love you, and there's trust there, you can be a lot more in control. You can pick your producer. You can pick where you kind of get this produced potentially. So it all depends on which pathway you want to go.
Interesting. Sorry, I'm just getting some crazy interference. I don't know if that's coming through. Hopefully it's not.
Yeah.
Maybe let's go back a little bit and talk about we'll go back to talking about the DP director relationship. You obviously have your a handful of DPs that you like to work with. What do you look for in a DP? If you, let's say hypothetically, you had a job where your go-to guys or girls weren't available, they're booked on something, and you've got to find someone that you've never worked with before. What's the first thing that you're like, okay, they need to have this, or I need someone that can do that? Like, what are the sort of first things that really influence how you go about choosing someone?
I think there's two key things for me. It's admiration for their work and how they work. That's a definite thing. I want and need to be a fan of someone, because that's important. Because it's like, for me, it's what moves me essentially. Then the second thing is their spirit. All the DPs I have a relationship with. That's important to me. Now, it doesn't mean I'm closed off to new relationships and new people, but I've been in some situations where, I'm told the DP has to be this person, or I'm not able to get a DP, and it's like there's choices project, they're all great and they're all fantastic people, but and then I feel there's a mismatch in terms of, again, energy and da. And I've had two shoots where the DP's gone rogue as much as possible, and what we've agreed is not what we're shooting. And sort of that's because their intention becomes for their reel, not for my reel, or what's going on and how we're doing stuff. So so in that regards, it's like I have to trust the person's intention, and I have to know that their spirit and stuff is good. So I'm always trying to build a relationship prior to actually shooting, and that's important to me. And one, it's because, again, I admire the people, but two, also when the time is right and things align, I already have that trust there in terms of how I operate, speak, and kind of communicate with that person. So I'm hoping that it kind of naturally flows like more on set, because there's a rapport.
Mm-hmm.
And Yeah, I think that's what it is, because it can be like war sometimes. Like sometimes you can go in. I've had some shoots where it's not been as stressful and it's been really cool. But most of my shoots can be very stressful. And again, I liken most things to football. So I don't want to go in and start the match, 1 minute into the game and we're losing 5-0, and it's tough. How do we come back from this, So you have to treat it like war sometimes. And so for me, it's like, I just want to know that I'm going in with people I can trust. And even if it goes down, like I'm going down with my team, not to take my team down with me, but, just to know that we're in this together and we're going to fight for each other
Yeah.
and fight for the best for the project. And so that's why like spirit energy is like one thing, and admiration for the person are my two key things.
Okay. And do you find do you end up do you ever end up reaching out to other director friends for recommendations in that situation? Or do you
Mm.
kind of, because it seems you seem pretty much like the DPs you like, whether you've worked with them or not. So I feel like you've probably
Yeah, I definitely know who I want to work with and where my intentions at.
yeah,
I'm also not closed-minded enough to say it's just this and there's nothing else. I think that can also be suicide. So I try not to have too much of like a dinosaur mentality, which is
yeah.
just, that's it now, with no growth sort of factor in. So I'm trying to always think about those things. But actually, sorry, I lost your question because I ran my thought.
Uh
What was your question again?
the question was, well, it kind of initially I was saying, would you reach out to other director friends of yours
Ah,
for recommendations? But then as I said that, I also kind of clicked that you're actually, it seems that you're very aware of DPs you
yeah.
already like anyway, so you probably would have people
Oh no,
that
but
are on your radar.
I have before. So for example, I done a promo last year that I personally buried the piece I really loved, but the label edit was terrible. But the version we had, we all like fell in love with. So I buried that version, and I think the I'll probably run the director's cut at some point this year. But I worked with Anne Evelyn on it, and she was fantastic. And I'd met her before because she was a close collaborator of Sean James Grant.
Mm.
They worked a lot together, and I met her through Sean, and just great person, just so dope. And then so when the job came up, and I sort of hit Sean up and was like, I know you've had a great experience with her. I want to get her for this. What do you think, sort of thing. And I knew she'd be great for it. And Sean just solidified it that bit more. You know what I mean? So if I do ask questions like that, it's more, I'm just looking for the cherry on top. I'm already kind of making the decision, but I'm also just trying to get like, okay, how are they on set? How is it for you? Da 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 da. Just so I know sort of who the person is and just how best I can also operate. Um, and so yeah, I'll look at close collaborators that I know personally and ask.
Yeah.
But that's not the be all end all of the decision.
Okay. And I mean, maybe this has happened to you. I've got a director pal that I've worked with a couple of times, and he at the beginning of the year did a very big project for a commercial for a very big fast food chain,
Mm.
and he was essentially given a DP. He had no say in it, and the DP was like this 60-year-old OG with like hella experience, credits for days, and is clearly a shit hot DP, and it does look amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but he did say that on set it was tough.
Oh, I can
Um,
imagine. I've been there, not
I mean, have
necessarily.
you? So I guess my question with that is, have you been in that situation where you're given a DP and you have no say in it? And also, what happens? Like, how does that happen? Like, what's happening that we don't see, that you're given a DP and you have no say in it? What causes that?
It's weird. I don't like it, but the decision making comes from up top sometimes. So I had one where it was a music promo, and DP's attached already without like a say so. It's a whole bunch of stuff like that. The project with Anne was also similar. At some point, there was like two different DPs attached that had no say so on, and I was like, hey, I'm doing this. It needs to be this way. I need to be able to choose my collaborators and sort of run. Um, I don't know why it happens, but I think sometimes it might be because A, there's a lack of like faith in the director sometimes. Or no, actually no. I've seen a few different things. What will happen is there'll be a commercial like similar to what you're talking about, and they will look at it and say, okay, the director may be a punt to the agency, but they're really good. But to get this over the line, we need someone who's done it before. So they have faith. So at least if the director's like out of sync, this person will resurrect it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So they're almost a bodyguard, and they're
Yeah.
just going to get you to, you know. So there's no way this can kind of go wrong. And so that I've seen that happen. Sometimes, like from a music video side, the artist may have a relationship with the DP already prior. So if a new director comes in, it's like, okay, cool. They know the look they're going to get already because they've seen the DP do something before. So again, most of it comes down to trust and where the trust lies and who the people like you can your agent or whoever however you've got in. Some people can negotiate enough to get you at the table, but it's just having that safety net of someone more experienced that will allow that. And I think what happens is they don't want it just to be like, okay, you guys done some like nice kind of 5K promos or things over here. You know,
Mm.
it's like 500,000. Like we ain't playing games here. You know, like
Yeah.
you guys only a nice little 5K, but you know we've got 500,000 to be looking after. So it can be like that sometimes. And so even though my experience with it was negative, I'm also not opposed to it in regards to the situation. So for example, if I got a commercial and it's like, you know, okay, you haven't done a commercial of this scale before and you need to do this, I'd be, you know, if I can't fight for the DPs that I want on it, and you know, it's a big barrier, and I have to open my mind up to someone sort of way more experienced than my wheelhouse, then yeah, I have to think in that headspace. Um, because once you've done that and you've achieved something, you're able to then, you know, you can build that trust and kind of go again, you know. And I think you have to look at the opportunity sometimes and say to yourself, okay, it may not be ideal, but can I come out with something great? Is this an opportunity that can work? And kind of function in that regards, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's always those kind of um I guess political kind of
Yeah,
things, you know, is this like background politics? I'm always curious to kind of figure
yeah,
out what
it's never done with harm because even that promo that I mentioned earlier, before Anne came in, I felt like the conversation around it was people. I thought the team that were looking at it were looking at like names on Instagram versus who's right for the project. And I've seen it happen a few times, and I'm surmising that it's probably sometimes the case agency side. I'm surmising it's sometimes the case production side in terms of reps, and I'm surmising that sometimes the case where you know sometimes directors as well. You know, like personally kind of picking stuff. So I think that's the nature of the beast at times, and uh, I've had it happen to me, and I'm trying to, you know, 9 times out of 10 when it's happened to me, I've never really been happy with the work that's come out, and so
Mhm.
that's why I try and navigate away from those things as possible. And I'm keen to just kind of build trust as much as possible in all the different works that I'm doing.
And then I guess from there, oh, hang on a minute. I'm just trying to think how I can
Hmm.
segue this, um, and whilst also being conscious of time. Well, I'm not sure because I'm not sure if I was gonna ask you about the gift, but I'm kind of almost want to ask you more about um, your voice as a director.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm just trying to think how I word it. Uh, I mean, what would you say is if someone was trying to sell you as a director onto something? How would they? How would they kind of? How would you want them to say? How would you want them to kind of say like explain your style and your voice? Do you know what I mean? It's a bit of
Yeah.
a bit of a. I think the question's there. I'm just struggling to put it into
I
words.
hear you, I
Do
hear
you
you, I
get what
hear
I
you, I hear
mean?
you, I hear you. I'm struggling to answer as well because it's a tough one for me. I don't know. I try and be poetic where possible. Just I feel like my work has poetry to it, or its intent is at least. Uh, maybe a bit more spiritual in places and surreal. And that's the kind of three aspects I have. In terms of voice, like I don't feel like I can pinpoint it because I don't necessarily consciously think of it. Like it's weird because I'm such a film fan before I'm even like, I think about myself in the craft, but like I can tell you everyone's style just from like just the directors I know personally to my favorite directors. I can tell you their style, but like when it comes to analyzing myself, I'm like, yo, I don't even know
Yeah.
like what is it, you know? So, but I feel that those are the three things that feels like it fits.
Hmm.
At the
I
same
see
time,
the
I think,
poetry part for
yeah,
sure.
I feel like I'm still trying to find that voice as well. And I know in my head what I want to say, but I don't know if I've said it yet on in film yet. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? So, so yeah, it's still something I'm my meat is like this at the moment, and it hasn't kind of like found its form.
Yeah.
So it may be in a range, but that's the range it is. But it's not. I don't think I've kind of quantified it fully in terms of voice. But I know there's a lot of things I want to touch on, discuss, explore visually, and I think that's kind of what I'm dialing into at the moment.
Okay. And now I see, now I have a segue, I think. So with that said, I guess talking about, I guess as essentially what, what is your style and your voice, how much of your aesthetic as a director is influenced by the DP? Do you know what I mean? Because if someone say someone looks at 3 of your films
Mhm.
and they're like, okay, I get what his aesthetic is. How much of that is you and how much of that is the DP? And how like flexible are you with that? Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
I think I'm pretty flexible, but like I think Olam will tell you like it's a strong collaboration, but I think Olam will tell you like I I'm giving him a whole bunch of references, color palettes and shots, like quite detailed. But
Mhm.
I know that he's going to take that and like flourish. But like I'm very specific with cameras here. This is this. This is that. This is that. I think you know I'm from the school of like Tarantino, and I know Tarantino is so like peculiar with or particular with how his shots are set up and what they do. But um, like I said, that's just a blueprint. Erlan or Courtney, for example, or any other DP I work with, they're then the architecture. But it's I I think basically I think I learned from previous shoots where it's like I don't want to say I'm controlling because I'm not, but I try and be as intentional as possible so I know that like when I come into the edit and we've got the rushes, I know what's going to be there. I know what we're aiming for fully, and it's dialed in. I think when I first started out, it was more kind of, oh, let's aim for these and see where we get to. And I found out the hard way, like not enough footage. Footage ain't great. You haven't got variety here. La 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 la. So um, yeah, it comes a lot from this end initially, and then it becomes like a strong collaboration from that point. Um, I also try to at times kind of push the visual palette of my DPs. I try not to sit in the same pockets that I've sat in before, not all the time. Like again, I think Olam will say like we've lost my faith. I kind of wanted to go to a location that like me and him never had on our reel at all, nowhere
Mhm.
near, just visually. Then with the gift, I was like same sort of thing. I kind of went for like the palette that we chose and how it was. It was I don't think you're going to find like for like on his reel elsewhere or anything. You know what I mean? It's not to say that any of those two are super unique, but it's kind of it's what I look for. It's I don't want to feel so. I don't want to feel like it's just. I don't. I never like feeling like potentially cookie cutter.
Mhm.
It's not to say it is and it isn't. But you know, I think again, just looking at my favorite filmmakers, I always felt they created unique worlds, and I think that's kind of where I want to be at, and that's kind of where my. So even if there's small traces of that now, it's kind of where I want to be at as I sort of move forward. Just be able to kind of create unique pockets that are not. Um, I think you can find any drill video, for example, and find like 12, well, thousands of drill videos that look
Yeah,
quite the
thousands.
same. And that's just the drummer, and the drummer's dope. So it's not even a knock on the drill drummer because that's just how pockets of things work. But I usually tend to find I like things that just sit out of pocket. And so that's
Yeah.
kind of what I aim for.
And would you? So you said earlier on that your kind of features are your like your goal.
Hmm.
What genre would be your first feature? If you
Interesting.
were
I feel
saying
like
that
it's,
you've got this
yeah,
surrealism thing going on, what would be the dream kind of, or the ideal first feature?
it's weird. I feel like it's a hybrid of genres because I look at Nolan and I look at how he blends like drama with sci-fi, for example. Do you know what I mean? Or you look at like Tarantino and sometimes it's like horror, thriller, drama, just all three together. And I feel like that's where I would sit. And you know, yeah, I feel like drama, sci-fi, thriller for me feels like psychological thriller in particular. Just kind of feels like the pockets I would sit in.
Yeah.
With the surrealism sometimes of like a Lynch,
Okay.
because I feel like the world and universe is so, I think when you look at the universe and say, we can look around, look outside and be like, man, buildings, this, that, concrete, but it's all man-made. When you think about it, we're on a giant rock in the middle of space, this big black entity, dark
Yeah.
matter, with all this energy, and like our energy pales in comparison to like everything outside of this rock. Um, it's a really surreal circumstance that and probability that we live within. So I feel like that's always with me in some place. But yeah, I think those drummers feel like they would be where I'm at.
Yeah. Mate, I'd like to see your influence on like a Black Mirror episode or something. I reckon
Yeah,
that'd be pretty
it's,
sick.
it's interesting. I think after this, I'm going to send you a treatment for a film that I've written because there's a couple similarities people have picked out in terms of tone
Okay.
on this, which is like it's quite dark and twisted, but it's yeah, I'll send you something after this.
Yeah,
See what
that'd
you
be
think.
wicked,
Yeah,
man. I'd love to see it. All right, we're nearly at the 1 hour mark.
sweet.
If you're up for it, I'd like to chat about the gift for like maybe 5 minutes if you're
Let's go.
down.
Let's go, man.
Cool. I did have it up on YouTube somewhere, just so I have a reference somewhere. But yeah, I just want to talk. Let me just bring that up although actually, is it? I wonder if it's easier.
Mm.
No, actually, I'll do it like this. Let me bring this up, and then I'll share my screen,
Mm.
and then I can just kind of. Or is it easier if you share your screen with it and talk about it? Um, I mean, what's cool about this is when we met last year, it was about this time, I think, maybe a bit later.
Mm.
You were telling me about it was in like treatment form at that point, I think, or
Yeah,
maybe not even there. And then when did this come out? Like
this came out like
last year?
October. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it got commissioned like 3 weeks prior to it coming out. We were the last like pitch in, and they were
Okay.
like, "Can you do it in 3 weeks, like the whole thing, and have it ready?" And I was like, "Yeah," and
Damn.
so I had to work backwards on it completely, but it was cool because it taught me a lot, and I knew it so well, which is interesting that you brought it up. That sort of I spoke to you about it
Mm.
way prior to even shooting it. I knew it so well that doing it in
So I'm just gonna
wasn't
share.
as tall of an order as I thought it would be.
I'm just gonna. Sorry to interrupt you. I'm
No,
just
no,
gonna
no worries.
share the screen. Is it up now?
Yeah, it's up. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna play this in the background because then the people that are watching will be able to see it. Hopefully, it just plays through. Yeah.
Sweet.
Sorry, I cut you off, and hopefully, I didn't mess up your flow there.
No worries. No, I was just saying that I knew it so well that actually doing it within a few weeks wasn't as tall as order as I thought it would be. It was still tough. It wasn't an easy task because there's still a finite amount of time to kind of get a lot of stuff done. But man, like Tony Long, who produced it, was fantastic. Just kind of getting everything done and allowing us to kind of make this happen.
Yeah, and because this will obviously be an audio episode of the podcast for
Hmm.
people that aren't able to kind of watch the video. What is the gift? If you give us like the elevator pitch on it.
Yeah, the gift is pretty much about an entity that approaches a boy without an identity, and offers him one, and you figure out the consequences of this gift essentially by the end of the film. Um, the overall thing on it is it's commentary on kind of the commercialism of crime as a genre. Um, just so this is kind of represented through this Avrex jacket that's in the film. Um, when grime sort of came out from the underground, it had this like beautiful energy and power to it, and just I saw it just kind of butchered in its initial years by like these commercial entities that kind of came in, didn't care for it, milked it for what it was, and then allowed it to kind of die back in the underground. And it's had many iterations of ups and downs, but that was the first sort of like one. And I think as a fan and someone who grew up around it, it was something that's always kind of irked me. So it was kind of put into this form.
Damn, the Averex jacket, man. That is like the I don't know, like the epitome of grime. From what is that, like early 2000s?
Yeah, like 202, 201, because like a lot of the American rappers like Biggie and Nas and like Belly, for example, it was an American thing initially, and then it came over to the UK. We got it like after their wave essentially, but I think the first two uniforms of grime were pretty much the academics tracksuit and the Avrex jacket.
Yeah.
But actually having a leather Avrex, you'd have to be like a top guy to have one because, which is the significance of the story in here as well. Like being a youngster with one attracted also the wrong type of crowd and wrong type of attention. So you had to be able to kind of hold your own to be able to flex one out.
Mm. And to talk about the cinematography on this,
Mm-hmm.
the Olan shot this, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is all location stuff, and that is, I guess, that the room, the kid's bedroom, that's an actual bedroom. It's not a set, is it? Is
Oh no,
that
we built that.
you built that?
It was a
Oh,
white
nice.
room. Yeah, we
Oh,
had to.
dope.
I really wanted that color scheme of like yellow and red with like bleeding orange in places, but I really wanted those two things to pop. So sourcing the exact wallpaper was one of the hard tasks because I wanted it to be pretty specific. And thankfully, Anna,
Let me go back
who
to
was
that.
our art director, she done a great job with that.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and pause on that wallpaper, although it's kind of soft.
Yeah, I think most of it's
Background
kind of
was,
soft as hell, but it's cool.
yeah, it is
It
cool.
was just the color scheme that I wanted to get across. I don't think YouTube's 240p is helping us, but it's fine.
And is there? Did you choose those colors specifically
Yeah.
for a reason? And what? Why those colors? Like, why did you
Um,
choose them? Telling you.
yeah, yellow innocence, red sort of the darkness of red and what red could represent. Sort of we knew we wanted a red Avrex jacket, so we wanted it to be like a theme that kind of played out. And then so obviously he's got a yellow top in here, but he's topless beforehand. So he had like essentially in that kind of more vacuum realm that he was in initially, he has no identity. Here he has traces of an identity with his yellow. So yeah, it was important to kind of have like a color that represented that.
Hmm.
And I just when I've seen this color combination, like I've loved how they blend. It's always had it's got a darkness to it, almost kind of like a sinisterness to it in places.
Yeah,
So that's kind of what I wanted to get across.
hanging, man. And then what's the cow? Where's the or do we have to figure that out?
I think the cow's open for interpretation, but initially for me, it was like, again, it was representing the milking of a scene and it represented the entities almost kind of. Um, the cow was in the real world until the entity is able to get the boy, and then him and the cow sort of disappear. So for me, it was like a little foreshadow of what was going to happen or
Hmm.
what he was after.
So dope. I love this shot too, with the where the kid's almost in complete silhouette
Mm.
with the window in the background. Excuse me. Um, yeah. I thought this was wicked. It's super creepy.
Yeah, Axel, who's done the sound design, also done like a really great job with this. He was, especially for our tight turnaround, Axel, just like killed it. And what we were doing was I got a lot of the old grime sounds that existed, like all the specific plugins that you can't even install on the modern Macs. I sort of found a workaround to kind of use it in sort of like certain VSTs that were still slightly functional, but able to use the sound banks. And I showed Axel what the sounds were and what the bait sounds were, and just said, here's the bait sounds. We can't use them this way. So how can we, and I said to him, think more, let's use these grime sounds, but not in that kind of traditional 140 BPM style. Let's kind of make it a lot more cinematic and sort of dial it up a bit more. And yeah, he just done a fantastic job. Axel's like a legend beyond legends.
Yeah. And that's what I think like was so cool about this, and is a prime example of I feel like people do the best work, whatever they are, director, DP, whatever it is, they do the best work when it's like something they've experienced, and it's their story.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, totally, man. Like you can I
because
don't know
you
if, yeah.
sorry.
No, I was just saying, I think you give a part of yourself when it comes from a certain place.
Yeah, because you wouldn't, like, if you weren't into grime, if someone had given you a brief and you weren't into grime at that time, you wouldn't necessarily know, you wouldn't be able to draw on that, like draw
No.
on, you wouldn't know that that's what happened. Maybe you might figure that out from a shitload of research, but
Yeah, but it's also, what's interesting about the story is that like it's purposely kind of looser from it in regards to like you can know nothing about grime and watch this, and you can watch it, and you don't have to know that info to experience something. Because
yeah,
I also didn't want to make it just like convoluted in that regard, in regards to kind of I think sometimes from when I was doing marketing, what I learned is that uh, a fan or a viewer is not someone who's in absolute knowledge, right? So you have to be able to provide experiences that a normal person or a casual person can experience, and then if someone knows more info, they can experience at like a sort of a more layered level. Um, and what I didn't want this to do was just kind of have like bait grime sounds and just like a bait MC and all those different stuff to kind of tell something. I kind of wanted to use the genre of grime in a space it hasn't been used before, but not necessarily have to rely on it so much. Like the background is there, but it's not like so in your face.
yeah.
So
And just for, because I do have a 20% US listeners, what does bait mean?
oh, obvious.
Yeah.
Just like, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
That's cool. I know, but yeah, I just it just like popped up because I was looking at the analytics of the podcast today. So yeah, don't want to leave those guys out.
Shout out my US guys.
Yeah, exactly. Man, I'm pretty hyped I'm happy to kind of wrap it up there if you are. I kind of feel like I touched on everything. I still want to do. I think I spoke to you about this before. I'd still like to do it at one point, like a joint episode with you and Olan together.
I'd be
and,
game. Let's
and
get him
talk
on.
about that.
Let's get him on. He'll probably dominate the conversation because that's how he is.
Really?
He's an egomaniac who's just trying to push his brand the whole time. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm glad
Maybe
to get this episode in beforehand because he will just take over the podcast.
yeah. Okay. Well,
Be warned.
I'll have
Be
to
warned.
learn some like, I don't know, some like reporting skills or something, some skill to learn how to kind of control
Yeah.
a conversation, so we don't take over the show.
And for anyone who doesn't get my kind of British sarcasm, he's not an egomaniac. This is just we have this love-hate relationship where we just we fire at each other when we feel like it for jokes.
I think that's why you guys, the work you do is as good as it is, because you just like you have that friendship, you have that relationship, you know what I mean? But yeah, man, I'm gonna, let me just close this and get rid of this screen share, stop share. Right, we're back. The live thing is still going. Yeah, man, thank you very much for taking time out. I do appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it big time.
No worries, man. I'm hopefully it was remotely interesting or worth your time.
Oh, it's definitely worth
Uh,
my time. I hope it's worth your time and the audience's time.
yeah, for sure.
And yeah, I'm loving what you're doing, man. So like, thanks for the opportunity, and I'm looking
All
forward to
good.
many, many more episodes.
Oh man, I'm trying. I'm actually gonna. I'm thinking. Actually, I get your opinion on this now. I'm thinking of trying to do a. Do you know Patreon? Do you know
Hmm.
Patreon? Trying to do that, and my what I want to do with it is continue to put the podcast out, but for like every episode, I have a Patreon exclusive episode where I go into a lot more detail,
Mm.
whoever the guest is, and really kind of dig deep, because there's only so much you can kind of talk about in an hour and a half, and it's often,
Oh, totally,
as
totally.
much as I try and get insight and try and, because I'm trying to like, for example, when I'm asking you questions, I'm asking stuff that I want to ask, and I'm also thinking, okay, what are the, because I know that I've got like 1,000 listeners now, so I'm like, what are these guys going to want to, what are these guys going to want to hear? So I'm like trying to, I'm processing everything I'm saying while I'm
Yeah,
saying it. It's just, it's quite difficult. So I'm hoping that I can continue to do these kind of, I guess, more surface level episodes, and then keep the guest on and doing like an extended episode, and that's kind of Patreon only.
dude, it's a great way. Like, I'm a big wrestling fan, so
Are you?
massively. So I listen to all the wrestling podcasts, and like the drill downs are where the core audience lies, because you start to get into all the info that like you've always been wanting to kind of hear, or sort of someone speak about, or sort of like touch on. And I look at the length of that stuff, and it's like 3 hours sometimes, but they're really good at kind of breaking the pieces down, and not, if you want to have it as one big cohesive thing, you can, but like just even the way that those guys also post them on YouTube, they'll just taking key segments and kind of place them out, and it's yeah. So I
Mm,
think there's a lot of good formats, so you can kind of, yeah,
yeah.
I'll send you some wrestling podcasts in particular, so you can look at the formats.
Yeah, that would
But
be cool.
but a lot of them do Patreons as well. So I think it's a good shout.
Yeah. And I'll be completely honest, there's a part of me that's like in lockdown panic where I'm thinking, fuck, if I'm not gonna be able to shoot for a while, I need to get some kind of income somehow.
Oh, totally. I told you already. I've retired from directing, so this is more retrospective on a
Yeah.
director. I'm a Call of Duty guy now.
Yeah, Call of Duty
So
streamer, Twitch guy.
yeah, completely.
Mate, maybe we should have a go. I don't know if I got time tonight. We should definitely have a game tomorrow.
Okay, tomorrow. Oh yeah, cool.
Do
Shout me.
tomorrow.
I'm down.
All right, wicked man. I'm just gonna cut this live real
Sweet.
quick. Uh,
Thanks everyone.